right, this topic is a lot of review from some of the previous sections. So first, just doing a quick review on secure management. Remember, our management plane needs to be protected. We should be using things like HTTPS and SSH whenever possible. Try to avoid using things like HTTP or Telnet. Anytime we are leveraging out-of-band management whenever possible, we should be doing so, whether it's via console access. Obviously, if we are located in the local area network, that's easier to do, but obviously if we're remoting in, we sometimes have to use that in-band management. Just depends on whether we have a dedicated management port or not. Also, we discussed a little bit about management session spoofing. So some countermeasures we had, of course, making sure that we're using things like SNMP version 3. We'll look at that configuration here in a little bit. And filtering of management access. So maybe applying some infrastructure ACLs or some access lists on our PTY lines. And whenever possible, using centralized authentication instead of local user accounts. So here are some reminders. Whenever possible, we have our designated out-of-band management interfaces in order to protect our management plane. Also, we generally want management access to prevent anyone outside of the network unless otherwise. So filtering management access using control plane ACLs, we talked about those a little bit already. And here are just some, overviews as far as local user authentication can be implemented for management access through methods like SSH or HTTP. We should really be avoiding using the insecure methods. And we also will do a quick overview. Remember, on box or managed locally, if we have the ability to. Sure, small deployments, it's easy. Anytime we're looking at ASDM or firepower management, anytime we're using a GUI, always make sure that we're using HTTPS when possible. And our centralized management is more suitable for those larger deployments. And we have some other options that are listed here. All right, as far as other protocols that we might use, making sure that we're using things like secure copy protocol or secure file transfer protocol. And we'll get into SNMP here in just a few moments. They do want to also remind you to just disable any functions like CDP wherever necessary, right? We might have to have CDP at, let's say, the access layer, but if we have any ports going outside or to DMZ, maybe disable it. Also making sure we lock down DHCP with things like DHCP snooping. So those are all some additional things that they point out in this particular section that you can certainly brush up on if you need a quick refresh. All right, trucking along, we have some SNMP version 3. Yes, SNMP does actually stand for Simple Network Management Protocol and not Security is Not My Problem. Because people would joke about that version 2 is insecure. So generally, whenever possible, we want to be able to enable SNMP version 3. So really quick, as a refresh, remember, this is something that we can enable and be very particular about. So if we want to poll some of our devices or have our devices send us unsolicited notifications, like traps and informs, we as administrators can set this up. So if we do want those traps or informs, we have to go in and specify those OIDs, which we see some examples of here. There are some great configuration guides on Cisco's website if you need some recommendations on how to set this up. Of course, we have the agent that's running on your router or your switch or firewall. And then we also have the MIB. Those MIB objects are going to be referenced by good old OIGs, our object IDs. So these do have a tree structure, so depending on how it is that you want to drill down, if you want to go with your root to your internet, to your management, to your MIB2, and specifically look at UDP or ICMP, you can kind of drill down on this tree to figure out what it is that you want to gather data on. And we can also set to access with those gets and those sets. We also have a network management station where we can push all of this data to. We might be sending all of our syslog messages to our network management station along with our good old SNMP messages. Now, here's a quick overview or quick model. Generally, we don't want to be running SNMP version 1 or 2 because our community strings are sent in clear text and there's no auth and no priv. But if we do want to enable maybe some priv or some auth or maybe some auth and no priv, we can certainly go in, we can set up a username, we can set up some of our more advanced hashing algorithms like SHA or AES for encryption. And version 3 allows us to have a much more secure based model. So we can have that data integrity and that privacy. So we'll kind of bounce back and forth between this slide and the configuration slide because it's a little bit easier to understand each of these steps if you aren't already familiar with them by kind of going back and forth. So generally what we're going to do is first set up a group. So that's going to map the SNMP users to the SNMP views. So we have the read, the write, and the notify views. But if we kind of fast forward a little bit, first we can see from global config, we're going to do the SNMP view and we'll give it a name. We need to make sure we have this written down or we make note of whatever name we want to give it. And then we can reference specific interfaces. And then the group is then going to tie that SNMP group version 3, its priv, and whether it's going to have read or write access with that view that we just created in that first step. All right. If we want to then reference an access list of 99, we can do that. We'll take a look at that access list down at the bottom. And then the view, which we just kind of looked at, is going to be defining those OIDs. All right. So what is it that it has the ability to do? We were looking at interfaces. So your list of OIDs might actually get pretty long. We just saw an example of one here, but you know, those can continue to grow and grow and grow. And then we can set up our user. So here we called it my SNMP user, and then we just want to reference the group that we provisioned in the previous step. So my SNMP group, make sure we're using version 3. And in this case, we're using auth for SHA or with SHA. We can see the string, the privacy, the AES with a key size of 128, and then the key. So keep in mind that generally whatever it is that we set up on each individual router, we also want to match on the network management station. So here our host is our network management station found at 10.10.10.50. We're going to be sending those informs using version 3 using the priv that we set up for my user in that previous step. So you can kind of see how these steps sort of build off of one another. So it's important to just make sure you're double checking the names of your views, your groups, your users, and any of the other parameters that you configure. Some of this is a little bit of a review. Remember, we have the interface ACLs and service-specific ACLs and COPP, and we have COPR. But remember, there are some limitations, so we might need to kind of mix and match between the different control features.